My thumb hovered over the flap of the envelope like it might bite me. Inside it was more than just my first real paycheck, it was proof. Proof that I had made it through the kind of storm that leaves people washed up for good. The numbers printed in black ink weren't lottery-winning huge, but they were bigger than anything I'd ever seen with my name attached. My hand trembled slightly as I ran my fingers over the company logo embossed in the corner, elegant, silver and real. I should have been elated. Maybe part of me was. But a bigger part? That part ached with the need to prove something. Not to myself. Not anymore. I had done the work, clawed my way out of the hole. Rehab. Relapses. The blank stares from old friends who stopped recognizing me? No, this wasn't about me anymore. This was about showing them. My parents, Damien and Lynn, the ones who kept score like it was a sport. How many times I failed. How many times they rescued me. They loved telling people how much they'd sacrificed for me with this sad, noble tone, like I was some sort of lifelong charity project. It didn't matter that I hadn't touched anything in over 2 years. In their eyes, I was always going to be the burnout son who couldn't keep a promise, a job, or even his own name clean. But this paycheck? It felt like leverage, like I could finally flip the script. That night, I booked a 4-day stay at Clearwater Haven, a resort they used to dream about going to when I was a kid. I remember them looking at brochures once, pointing at photos of the infinity pool and beachfront suites, then sighing like it was all just too far out of reach. But not anymore. Not for me. This was my chance to give them something they'd always wanted and maybe, just maybe, earn something I'd always wanted. Their pride. I reserved dinner at Alara's fancy, old-school, white linen everything, the place where they used to celebrate anniversaries before they stopped doing that kind of thing. I could already picture the stunned look on my mom's face when she saw the reservation. How my dad's eyebrows would lift just slightly before he muttered something that sounded like approval. I rehearsed what I'd say a dozen times. How I'd frame the job, the paycheck, the trip not as a brag, but as a peace offering. A bridge. I wanted them to see me, the real me, not the version of me they kept locked in their memories. The night of the dinner, I arrived early, sat in the restroom for 10 minutes adjusting my collar, smoothing my hair, breathing, practicing my smile until it felt close enough to genuine. The maitre d' gave me a nod of approval when I stepped out. That felt good. Small, but good. They walked in 7 minutes late. Classic. My dad, always punctual, gave me a look that said, "You owe me time now." My mom's expression was somewhere between confused and skeptical. I stood up and smiled anyway. "Tristan," my dad said. No hug. No handshake. Just my name, dropped like a file on a desk. "Mom," I greeted. She leaned in, offered the kind of air kiss you give to relatives you don't trust. "This is unexpected," she said, glancing around like she expected to see a camera crew or a prank in progress. I motioned for them to sit. My voice caught for a second, but steadied. I wanted to celebrate. I got the job. My dad narrowed his eyes. "Marketing position? The one from the interview?" I nodded. "I started last week. Today was my first paycheck." My mom perked up. "Already?" That was fast. Her voice stayed neutral, but her eyes flicked to the envelope I'd set on the table like it might contain a winning lotto ticket. I offered a hesitant smile. "It's good. I'm good. 2 years now," I thought. This dinner might be a nice way to mark the start of something new. My dad exhaled sharply. Not quite a sigh, but close. "Let's be realistic, Tristan. We've heard the New Leaf speech before." And just like that, I was back in the ring. "It's different now," I said, a bit too quickly. "I've got a sponsor, a stable job, structure." "How much?" my mom asked suddenly. I blinked. "What? Your paycheck?" she clarified, placing her napkin in her lap like she was settling in for a performance. "How much did you get paid?" Not, "What's the job like?" Or, "Are you happy?" Just the dollar amount. That was always the real currency of love in our house. I told her. Her eyebrows went up. "That's more than I expected." "Well," my dad muttered, "that's about what we shelled out for your last rehab." The words hit harder than they should have. I hadn't asked them to bring that up. I hadn't asked for the comparison. "So," my mom continued, "this dinner, is it your way of repaying us?" "No," I said, feeling my throat tighten. "It's not about that." "Then what?" My dad asked. Just wanted to rub in that you're finally doing what you should have done years ago? The fantasy shattered. The bridge burned before it was even built. I need a minute, I mumbled, pushing back from the table. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. The tie, the suit, the polished shoes, all of it felt like a costume now. I pulled the envelope from my pocket. Inside were the tickets to Clearwater Haven. Glossy. Beautiful. 4 days of luxury that I thought would somehow make them see me differently. But they didn't want to see me at all. I tore the envelope into quarters. Then eighths. Then even smaller. Let the pieces fall into the trash like broken promises. When I came back, I was calm. I've got an early morning, I said, placing enough cash on the table to cover everything. But we haven't even ordered, my mom said. I've lost my appetite. My dad raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? I met his gaze evenly. It means I heard everything I needed to hear. And I walked out. The city air was crisp when I stepped out of the restaurant. A quiet kind of cold that didn't sting but woke you up. I didn't rush. I didn't even look back. My shoes echoed on the sidewalk, each step lighter than the last, like I was peeling off layers of shame. I didn't realize I was still carrying. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing their approval. I was walking away from it. Not out of spite, out of survival. By the time I reached the train station, my fingers had already found Susie's contact. She picked up on the first ring. They were terrible, weren't they? She asked, skipping hello like she already knew, which of course she did. Worse, I said, sitting on a bench under flickering lights. I brought them there to celebrate. Show them I was finally okay. But all they saw was a receipt. Susie sighed. Some people don't see the version of you that's standing in front of them, just the one they've already decided exists. I tore up the resort tickets. A pause. You what? They were supposed to be a gift. For them, Clearwater Haven. I booked 4 days. Beachfront. Sunset view. All of it. You spent actual money on those two? Yeah, I know. Another pause. Please tell me you still have the reservation. I glanced at my phone. I think I can salvage it. Then come over. Bring your laptop. We're going to that beach. Just you and me. Seriously? I've been saving my PTO for a miracle or a breakdown. This sounds like both. I let out the first real laugh I'd had all day. I'll bring marshmallows. Make it the big ones. Clearwater Haven wasn't just beautiful, it felt unreal. Like someone had taken every Instagram perfect travel photo and decided to build a resort out of them. The water was clear enough to see straight to the bottom, even from the shore. The kind of blue that didn't exist in city skylines. Palm trees swayed like they were in on the joke, and the sun didn't just shine, it glowed. Susie and I arrived a day later, bags in hand and not a single ounce of guilt between us. I still can't believe you brought me instead of them, she said, dropping onto a beach lounger in oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat that was more drama than shade. Best trade I've ever made, I replied, handing her one of the absurdly colorful drinks we'd just ordered. 3 days in, I could feel the difference not just on the outside but deep in my chest. No tightness in my shoulders, no checking my phone out of habit, no mental drafts of imaginary apologies, just quiet. The kind of quiet I didn't know I needed until I felt it. You're different here, Susie said one afternoon as we walked barefoot along the shoreline. I glanced at her. How so? You're not performing. You're not editing yourself. I looked out over the water. Maybe I'm just remembering who I was. Before I spent so long trying to earn what should have been given freely. She didn't respond with some motivational quote or cliche. She just nodded, understanding in her silence. We did everything: snorkeling, paddleboarding, drank too many fruity cocktails with names we couldn't pronounce. We ate slowly, for once not watching the bill or the clock. We built sandcastles with ridiculous turrets and moats. Grown adults acting like kids again. It was healing in a way therapy hadn't touched. I took pictures, hundreds of them, not to prove anything to anyone, but to capture the joy I didn't want to forget. Susie insisted on documenting every weird moment. Us trying to balance coconuts on our heads, her wearing 3 pairs of sunglasses at once, me failing epically at beach volleyball. This one, she said, showing me a photo of us laughing, completely out of focus, is my favorite. It's not perfect, but it's real. On our last night, we splurged on the resort's fanciest restaurant. The kind of place where they don't bring menus, just experiences. We showed up in sundresses and linen shirts, tanned and salt-haired, looking like we belonged. For once, I felt it. To belonging, Susie toasted, clinking her glass against mine. Wherever we decide that is. To choosing our people, I replied, not settling for the ones we were handed. Back home, reality crept in like fog. Work emails, rent, grocery runs. But I carried something back with me that didn't wash off in the airport bathroom sink. Clarity. I stopped checking for messages from my parents, stopped waiting for the apology that was never coming. For the first time, I wasn't just sober, I was free. Not because I had cut something out of my life, but because I had added something better. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a work meeting, my phone started vibrating like it had a personal crisis. 23 text messages, 17 missed calls, all from Lynn. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, already bracing for impact. First voicemail, Tristan Malcolm Reed. How dare you flaunt that ridiculous beach vacation all over social media without a word to your father and me? I closed my eyes. Of course, Susie had tagged me in the pictures. The photos I hadn't even thought twice about sharing. My fingers hovered over the messages, each one angrier than the last. Accusations, guilt, thinly veiled insults. Then the kicker. Are you dealing again? Is that how you paid for Clearwater Haven? The first stared at that last text like it might vanish if I waited long enough. Like maybe I'd misread it. Nope, I should have ignored the call when it came through. But old habits, like trauma responses, die loud. Hello? Her voice was a blade. Explain yourself. Now. I took a slow breath. Explain what, Mom? Don't play dumb. The resort. The expensive drinks. The lavish dinners. That's not something an ex-addict just stumbles into. Actually, I said calmly, it is. When that ex-addict works hard, earns a signing bonus, and gets hired because of actual talent. There was a pause, a long one. Then her voice changed, something syrupy and fake blooming behind her words. You mean to tell me you're actually making that kind of money now? And there it was. That sharp turn from outrage to interest, from insult to curiosity. Because in her world, worth was measured in dollar signs. Why didn't you say so at dinner? She continued. We had no idea. This changes everything, does it? I didn't answer. We've never really had a proper anniversary trip, you know, she went on. With everything we've done for you, I'm at work, I cut in. I have to go. Wait, I'll think about it. Click. I stood in that hallway longer than I should have. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzing over my head like background static to the weight sitting in my chest. I knew I should move, get back to the meeting, answer emails, return to the version of myself that didn't flinch when my phone lit up. But I couldn't. My mother's voice echoed in my head, that familiar mix of passive aggression and false concern. The worst part wasn't what she said. It was that I wasn't surprised, that somewhere deep inside I'd been expecting it all along. Back at my desk, I sat down without speaking. My coworkers, thankfully, were too buried in quarterly reports to notice that I was barely breathing. On my desk sat 2 framed things. One was my 2-year sobriety certificate. The other was a photo of Susie and me from Clearwater Haven, mid-laugh, hair messy, sun-drunk, eyes bright. I stared at the photo. That joy was real. That version of me? He was real too, but he wouldn't survive if I kept letting people drag him back into places he'd outgrown. I pulled out my phone again, not to text or call, but to draw a line. I blocked my mom. Then my dad. Then their joint email account, the one they used to send long, guilt-laced essays masquerading as check-ins. Each click was quiet, unceremonious. No dramatic flair, no tears, just a decision, a boundary drawn in pixels, but felt deep in bone. The kind of silence I'd never given myself permission to claim. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Not them, Susie. Tris. I just saw your mom's comments on my photos. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I stared at the message, my thumb hovering. Was I okay? No, but I would be. I blocked them. The dots blinked almost immediately. All of them? Everywhere. Good. That was it. No lecture, no follow-up questions. Just one word of support. and somehow it hit harder than any monologue ever could. That night, my apartment felt different. Not because anything had changed in the space, but because something had shifted in me. For the first time, the silence wasn't haunting, it was clean. I stood at the kitchen counter, microwave humming behind me, thinking about all the years I'd spent trying to fix something that didn't want to be fixed, trying to earn forgiveness for things I wasn't even guilty of anymore, trying to buy love that came with receipts and return policies. What a waste. When Susie knocked, I didn't even wait for her to say anything. I just opened the door and hugged her. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that says, "You kept me alive before I knew how to do it myself." "I brought ice cream," she said, holding up a tub of chocolate chip cookie dough like it was sacred. "Is there any other kind?" I teased. We sat on the couch, legs tucked under us, flipping through vacation photos, the ones she'd tagged me in, the ones my parents had turned into accusations. But looking at them now, without shame, was healing. "You know," she said, "you look happy in these." "I was," I said, "and I still am, or I'm getting there." She tilted her head. "You sure you're not mad at me? About posting them?" "Not even a little," I said. "If anything, it gave me the push I needed." To finally block them? To finally stop apologizing. The next morning, I woke up to quiet. No guilt, no dread, no waiting for a message that would ruin my day before breakfast. It was just me, my coffee, and a whole stretch of time that I could call mine. I got to work early, cranked out 2 presentations, chatted with coworkers like a human, not a trauma ghost. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trying to make up for something. I felt normal. And honestly, that was the most revolutionary feeling of all. But of course, peace doesn't come without its tests. Later that afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Aunt Camille. Your mother is devastated. Please call her. She's been crying for days." My hands tightened around the phone. The flying monkeys had arrived. Family friends, distant relatives. The outer orbit of enablers, trained to do damage control the moment I stepped out of line. I didn't reply, just blocked the number. 5 minutes later, another. "This is Pastor Neil. Your father is deeply hurt. They only want to understand. Don't cut them out like this. Block. Another. You'll regret this one day. Unknown number. No signature, block." I could have written a script for each of them. The guilt trip. The rewrites of history. The polished manipulation dressed up as concern. But I wasn't reading from their script anymore. That weekend, Susie and I went for a walk around the city. Just 2 people moving through the world, unburdened. I told her about the texts. "Of course they're sending out messengers," she said. "It's how they avoid doing the work themselves, make you feel like you're the villain for setting a boundary." "I don't feel guilty," I said, surprised by the words as they came out. "You shouldn't." "I feel sad, but not guilty." She nodded. "That's growth, Triss. That's healing. Guilt says I did something wrong. Sadness says this still hurts. And you're allowed to feel both." We sat on a park bench for a while, watching people pass. Kids chasing pigeons. Couples laughing over shared headphones. Somewhere nearby, a musician was playing something soft and jazzy. It felt like the world was exhaling. What if they never change? I asked quietly. Susie didn't flinch. "Then they never change. But you have." Sunday night, I cleaned out a drawer in my desk I hadn't touched in over a year. Inside was a folder full of things I used to use for motivation. Notes from meetings. Letters from my sponsor. Printed affirmations I'd taped to the mirror during early recovery. All of it reminded me how far I'd come. I added one more thing, a printed photo from Clearwater Haven, the one where I'm standing alone at the edge of the water, looking out at the horizon. It was taken by accident. Susie hit the shutter when she meant to adjust the zoom, but I love it. Because that's what healing looks like. Not a celebration, not a finish line, just someone standing still, not running from anything. The strangest part about cutting ties with my parents wasn't the silence, it was how quickly my body adapted to it. At first, I kept expecting something. A letter, a phone call from an unknown number, a relative showing up at my office under the guise of checking in, but none of that happened. After the initial wave of guilt messages and anonymous numbers, things went quiet. And in that quiet, I started to grow. Not loudly, not in some dramatic, tearful montage, just slowly, naturally. Like moss on stone, like roots learning they don't have to twist themselves around broken soil anymore. I got better at my job, not in a flashy way. I just showed up more focused. Ideas came easier. I started getting invited to brainstorm sessions, then strategy meetings. People started listening when I spoke. My voice didn't shake anymore. Funny how much of your power comes back when you're no longer wasting it trying to prove you're worth loving. Susie noticed first. "You're walking different," she said one morning as we waited for coffee. "Like you're not bracing for impact anymore." "I'm not," I said, realizing it was true the moment I said it. It's wild. The little ways life opens up when you stop trying to squeeze yourself into other people's molds. I started cooking again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Not just heating up frozen meals, but real cooking. Slicing vegetables slowly, trying new spices, playing music too loud and dancing with myself in the kitchen like no one was watching. Susie came over once and found me mid-spin, spatula in hand. "Oh, God," she laughed. "He's finally cracked. Leave me be," I grinned. "This is therapeutic. You're a domestic goddess now." I should have known. I served her shakshuka and homemade bread. We ate barefoot on the couch, legs crossed, our plates balanced on mismatched throw pillows. Nothing fancy. Everything perfect. We talked for hours that night. Not about the past, not about our parents or the weight of things we couldn't change. We talked about where we wanted to travel next. How she was thinking of going back to school. How I'd been considering starting a passion project on the side, something creative, maybe design consulting or content strategy for small businesses. "I like helping people tell their story," I said, stirring honey into my tea, "but only if they actually want to be heard." She raised her cup. "To real stories. To honest ones." A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name, written in my mother's perfect cursive. I stared at it on the counter for a long time. I didn't open it right away. Something about seeing her handwriting again made my hands itch. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down, took a breath. Inside, it was a 3-page letter, folded neatly, written in ink that hadn't smudged, because of course she took her time. My mother always made her pain look elegant. It started out as a guilt trip, of course. How my absence had embarrassed them in church. How she didn't understand why I was being so cold. How my father had taken it harder than he let on. Then came the pivot. "You clearly have resources now," she wrote. "If you're truly serious about being a family again, there are ways to show it." Ways to show it. She didn't ask how I was, or if I was happy, or if I was safe. She asked for proof. Again, proof in the shape of a plane ticket, a gift, a check. Something she could measure, report, and wrap in a bow labeled, "Look how well he turned out." We raised him right. I placed the letter back into the envelope without finishing the last paragraph. Later that night, I fed it to the fireplace, watched the edges curl inward, then disappear. It didn't feel angry. It felt final. After that, the dreams started coming. Not nightmares, just echoes. Memory fragments playing out like short films. Me as a kid, coming home late and finding the door locked. Not because they were scared, because they were making a point. Me, 17, trying to apologize after my first relapse. My dad reading the newspaper without looking up. Me, 23, sitting on a cold rehab cot while my mother told the nurse that he doesn't respond well to kindness. I'd wake up from those dreams disoriented, the old ache in my chest flaring like it had muscle memory. But then I'd see the framed photo on my nightstand, me and Susie at the beach, grinning, blurry, real, and I'd breathe again. Healing doesn't mean you forget. It just means you stop letting it define your present. Weeks passed. Then a month. Life moved, as it always does. Susie started her grad school application. I officially launched my side project, a small consulting brand focused on helping underdog creatives market themselves without losing their voice. I called it Quiet Strength. She helped me design the logo. I landed my first client 2 weeks later, a nonprofit run by a single mom trying to build an art center for kids in her neighborhood. She cried on our second call because I took her seriously when no one else had. That night, I cried too. Not for her, for me, for the version of me who'd once believed he'd never be taken seriously by anyone. Turns out, He was wrong. One Friday, Susie showed up at my apartment with a bottle of cheap champagne and a stack of takeout. "You," she said, placing everything on the table, "are officially overdue for a celebration." "What are we celebrating?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You," she said, popping the cork with a grin. "And the fact that you're not flinching anymore." I stared at the foam spilling over the rim of her glass. She was right. I wasn't flinching anymore. Not at my phone. Not at the mail. Not at the thought of running into someone from my parents' circle. Because I was done explaining my piece. Some people find healing in closure. I found mine in distance. And the life that grew in that space, it was nothing short of beautiful. It started with a wedding invitation. A cream envelope slid under my apartment door sometime on a Tuesday. No postage. No name on the front, just to Tristan in soft gold script. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A neighbor, maybe. But when I opened it and saw the embossed names Lydia Grace Bennett and Ryan Elias Reed, my stomach turned. Ryan, my cousin. Golden boy of the Reed family. Always the favorite. Always the one my parents compared me to when they ran out of original insults. And now, apparently, I was invited to his wedding. The note inside was brief. Too brief. "We'd love to have you there. Your parents will be attending." It would mean a lot to the family. No sender, no warmth, no acknowledgement of anything that had come before it. Just an expectation dressed up as an opportunity. An attempt at false unity. I stared at it for a long time, like it might rewrite itself if I waited long enough. But it didn't. It stayed silent, sterile, smug. When I told Susie, she didn't even try to hide the look on her face. "Do they think you're an NPC in their storyline?" she asked, waving a fry in the air. "Like you just pause when they're not around and reappear when they hit or zoom?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "I think they're hoping I'll show up, smile, pretend everything's fine, and sit quietly so the family photos look complete." "You going?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't think I can." "You can. You just don't want to." Which is valid. But what if not going proves their point? She raised an eyebrow. "What point is that? That I'm difficult? That I can't let go? That I ruin things?" Susie leaned back. "Tris, not going doesn't make you petty. It makes you honest." "I don't want to be the problem child again. You're not. You're the one who told the truth and got punished for it. They just don't know what to do with someone who doesn't play by shame anymore." I looked down at the invitation again. "I want to be past this. I want to be unaffected." She reached across the table, covered my hand with hers. "You are. But even healed people still bleed if you poke the old wounds. That doesn't mean you're not healing, it just means you're human." The week of the wedding, I felt a strange weight settle into my bones. I didn't open social media, didn't check messages, didn't respond to the unknown numbers that started calling again. Instead, I cleaned. I reorganized my closet, scrubbed the baseboards, repainted a chipped wall in the hallway. Not because it needed to be done, but because my hands needed something to do while my heart recalibrated. On the day of the wedding, I didn't leave my apartment. I let the whole thing pass like a storm I didn't have to be in. I thought I'd feel guilt. Instead, I felt light, like I'd sidestepped a trap I used to walk into willingly. A week later, I got a voicemail from my father. Not a call, a voicemail. 39 seconds long. His voice was measured. Too measured. "We noticed you weren't at the wedding. A lot of people asked about you. We told them you were busy with work," which I assume is true. "Your mother was disappointed, but she understands. You should call sometime. It's been a while." It was like he was trying out empathy but hadn't figured out the right tone yet. I didn't respond. The next day, an email came from my mother. Subject line, "Let's talk." I opened it, not because I wanted to, because some part of me needed to see if the words had changed. They hadn't. "Your absence was felt. It was very hurtful. You embarrassed us, Tristan. But we're willing to put that behind us if you're ready to move forward. Life's too short to hold grudges." Grudges. The words stuck in my throat. As if setting boundaries was the same thing as holding a grudge. As if healing in private was a form of punishment. I sat with that email for a while. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote back. Short. Direct. Honest. "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm holding space for the version of me that had to survive years of being dismissed, controlled, and devalued. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's something you'll have to sit with. I don't owe you attendance. I don't owe you performance. I don't owe you a version of me that makes your story more palatable. I wish you peace, but I'm choosing mine. I hit send before I could second guess myself. No flourish, no signature, just the truth. Later that night, I met Susie at the little diner we always went to when things felt too heavy. We ordered pancakes at 9 p.m. and watched the rain streak down the windows. I wrote back, I said. She raised her eyebrows. And? I told the truth. For once, not to make peace with them, but to make peace with myself. She nodded slowly. That's big. It didn't feel big. It felt quiet. She smiled. The best things usually are. We didn't talk about my parents again that night. We talked about her new professor, who looked like a retired rock star and said things like energy is currency. We talked about my nonprofit client, who was now getting local press. We talked about nothing and everything and life and little moments that made us laugh until we cried. It felt like the opposite of performance. It felt like living. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in me again, a softening. Not toward my parents, but toward myself. For the first time, I stopped seeing the years I lost as wasted. I started seeing them as chapters. Not all chapters are meant to be reread, but that doesn't mean they didn't shape the story. And some endings, you write them yourself, not because you have to, but because you finally can. Somewhere around mid-October, I realized I hadn't thought about my parents in days. It caught me off guard at first. Like waking up and noticing pain that used to live in your bones is just gone. Not replaced by anything. Not numbed. Just no longer there. It wasn't that I stopped caring. I just stopped bleeding from the same wound over and over. Life didn't feel like something I was trying to escape anymore. It felt like something I got to build. I started waking up early not out of anxiety but habit. Made coffee before the sun rose. Sat by the window and watched the city stretch itself awake. There was a calm in those moments that I'd never experienced before. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, but stays anyway. Susie moved into an apartment 2 floors below mine. Said the building had better energy and worse plumbing, but she liked being close. I liked it too. She became my emergency contact without us ever talking about it. One day, it just made sense. We still had bad days, stressful work weeks, the occasional spiral, but we had each other. And in a world that never stopped spinning, that was everything. One quiet Saturday morning, I found myself walking through a neighborhood I hadn't visited in years. It was unplanned. One of those things where your feet start moving before your brain catches up. The streets were the same, but smaller. The sidewalks cracked where they used to be clean. The old bookstore was gone. A vape shop had replaced it. Time changes things whether you want it to or not. I walked past the house I grew up in. Same beige paint. Same mailbox hanging crooked on the post. I stopped across the street, hands in my pockets. There were new curtains in the windows. A different kind of car in the driveway. It wasn't ours anymore. It hadn't been for years. But I still knew every dent in that front step, every creak in the gate, every place I'd once tried to disappear in. I didn't cry, didn't ache. I just stood there and let the memories pass through me like wind. That house didn't hold me anymore, and I didn't hold it. Back at home, I finally opened the last box in my closet. I'd moved it with me 3 apartments ago, never touched it, just kept it because I wasn't ready to let go. Inside were old journals, rehab discharge papers, letters I'd written but never sent, a photo of me at 19, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach my eyes. I sat on the floor and took them in one by one, not with judgment, not with regret, but with gratitude. That version of me, young, broken, trying, he kept going. Even when no one believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself, he kept showing up. I didn't throw anything away. I kept it all. Because healing isn't always about letting go. Sometimes it's about honoring the parts of you that survived the fire. That night, I hosted dinner. Not a party, not a performance, just a handful of people who'd become my family. Susie, of course. Javier, my coworker who once covered for me during a panic attack and never asked why. Marie, my neighbor with a laugh loud enough to rattle windows and a habit of baking too much banana bread. We sat around my kitchen table, eating, laughing, playing bad music, and worse card games. Someone spilled wine. Someone else cried while talking about their dog. Nobody tried to be perfect. Everyone just showed up, and I realized this was it. Not the resort, not the paycheck, not the big, showy moments. This. A kitchen full of mismatched chairs and found family. A night without masks. A life I didn't have to explain. After everyone left, I stood in the doorway for a while, watching the empty street below. No messages from my parents, no calls, just quiet. But not the kind that hurts anymore. The kind that feels earned. I turned off the lights, poured a glass of water, and walked over to the shelf where I kept my most important things. The photo from Clearwater Haven, my 2-year sobriety certificate, now nearly 3. A framed note Susie once scribbled on a napkin and stuck to my fridge. "You are not what they couldn't love." Right next to it, I added something new. A single sentence I wrote on a blank postcard. "I am not who I was, but I am still entirely mine. I know they might reach out again. One day there may be another letter, a phone call, a messenger with kind eyes and a hidden agenda. I don't dread it, because now I know I don't have to answer. And even if I did, I wouldn't be walking into that conversation as the person they remember. I'd be walking in as someone whole, not fixed, not perfect, but free. To anyone out there still tangled in the kind of love that bruises more than it heals, this part is for you. You are allowed to outgrow the people who raised you. You are allowed to walk away from places that only know your brokenness. You are allowed to choose joy without permission. You are allowed to be a full person without earning it. And most of all, you are allowed to begin again, quietly, boldly, on your own terms. Some nights I still dream of them, but it's not like it used to be. It's not begging, or searching, or trying to make them see. It's just echoes. And echoes can't hurt you when you've built a home of your own. I don't need their permission anymore, because I've finally given it to myself. To live, to breathe, to belong, to take up space, to be loved first by me and maybe, someday, by someone else who won't try to shrink me. And until then, I've got pancakes at midnight, too many photos on my walls, friends who knock without warning, a heart that doesn't skip anymore when my phone buzzes, a life made not from what I lost, but from everything I kept. Story 2, we hope we could assist you as well. Following the repayment of my twins' $280,000 in debt, my mother stated, I covered my own expenses. I received the fellowship of a lifetime a week later. I've been the other twin my entire life. You cannot possibly comprehend what it's like to share your face with someone else, while yet trying to be recognized as your own unique individual, if you have never been an identical twin. However, try to picture yourself being physically identical to your brother, but nonetheless feeling like the inferior in your parents' eyes. I'm Gina, a 29-year-old who recently completed her medical residency with Grace, my identical twin sister. Our resemblance has always been uncanny. Identical height, identical laugh, identical scholastic aptitude. We even made the decision to become physicians, albeit she selected cardiology and I neurology. The way our parents handled us was the only significant difference between us. Our parents made it apparent that Grace was their ideal kid from the time we were young. She got a new laptop for her specific projects on our 10th birthday. I received a collection of scientific books. Our father treated Grace to a special supper after we both earned the honor roll with identical GPAs. When we both needed braces, I was invited as an afterthought, and Grace received the almost undetectable type. I received metal. Throughout our early years, the pattern remained constant. Gina is more self-sufficient. When family members questioned the discrepancy, my mother would respond. She has always been very independent. She was saying that Gina is less in need of us. Gina will discover it for herself. And I did. Early on, I realized that I had to take action to achieve my goals. I earned additional cash by babysitting while Grace was given a substantial stipend. While my parents funded Grace's participation in the same summer activities, I sought for scholarships. My parents' support in me always felt conditional, so I sought out mentors who shared that belief. The first person to really see me was Dr. Marion Carter, who recognized me as Gina, a committed student with promise, rather than as Grace's twin or the independent one. While my parents were busy attending Grace's debate competitions, I volunteered at the university hospital, where she was the head of neurology during my high school years. Dr. Carter was drafting letters of recommendation and assessing my research papers. She ended up being the mentor I really needed. Grace and I were both accepted to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in spite of the unequal support. Our qualifications were equal: similar GPAs, similar extracurricular activities, and similar MCAT scores. The distinction was that our parents just nodded at my acceptance letter while beaming with delight at Grace's. We were always confident in your ability to succeed. With his arm securely encircling Grace's shoulders, our father spoke. During medical school, the trend persisted. Grace's flat close to college was paid for by our parents, and I took out further loans to pay for my housing and part-time job at the university library. Every week, they gave Grace care gifts. If mine arrived at all, it was once a month. They came to all of Grace's presentations, but they only attended one of mine. They also departed early to attend the study group meal Grace was hosting. Nevertheless, I persisted. Like Grace, I graduated with honors. At commencement, we stood next to each other, wearing the same crowns and dresses and sharing the same accomplishments. But the support we had gotten along the road was quite different. Our parents asked us both to supper at their place a week after we graduated. It seemed to me like a little celebration for finishing medical school. Rather, it was the point at which years of covert favoritism came to a head and became indisputable. With his glass raised, our father announced, "We have an announcement. We're really proud of you two for becoming physicians and for helping Grace get off to a good start in her profession. We have made the decision to fully repay her college loans." The room whirled around me. Our combined debt from medical school was about $280,000. I stared at my mom, expecting for them to declare they were assisting me, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rather, she gave an apologetic grin. "We wish we could do the same for you, Gina, but we just don't have enough money set up for you both. Additionally, you've always had a knack for solving problems. We are certain that you will handle your loans well." At least Grace was polite enough to display discomfort. Gina said, "Mom, Dad, that doesn't seem fair to me." Dismissively, our father waved his hand. "Not everything in life is fair. We're making the most of what we have, girls. They had more than enough to support us both." They enjoyed a very affluent existence thanks to my mother's real estate job and my father's prosperous engineering enterprise. They had just bought a Florida vacation house. Their decision had nothing to do with resources. Priorities were at issue. Despite feeling empty inside, I remained composed at dinner, nodding and grinning robotically. I eventually let myself cry later that night while I was by myself in my flat. Suddenly, I felt like my debt was pressing me physically. The money wasn't the only factor. It was the clear message that accompanied it. It was worthwhile to invest in Grace. No, I wasn't. I brushed away my tears the following morning and carried on as usual. I worked it out on my own. I looked into fellowships and loan forgiveness schemes. I made a rigorous spending plan. Despite working longer hours, I took a residency job that paid a little more. Grace, meanwhile, had no debt when she started her residency, which gave her the freedom to select a high-profile but low-paying job. While most residents went out for drinks throughout our residency years, I worked more hours than the majority of my friends. I took on additional rotations after shifts, while they went on weekend getaways to unwind. To save money, I remained behind. Every choice I made was influenced by the weight of my debt. Our residency programs are ending in 6 months. I was contacted for the Patterson Neurology Fellowship by Dr. Carter, who had remained my mentor throughout medical school. Only 5 neurologists were given the most coveted fellowship in the nation each year. It entailed moving across the nation and committing to a rigorous 5-year research program with few clinical hours. But it also included full loan forgiveness and a sizable salary for ongoing research. Dr. Carter advised Gina to apply. Their needs are precisely met by your studies on neuroplasticity in trauma sufferers. And when the news comes out, I could even stop by whatever celebration is going on if you understand. After working lengthy hospital hours, I frequently stayed up until dawn to polish my study proposal throughout the following 3 months while I worked on my application. I kept the application a secret from my family. I had learned over the years to keep my hopes to myself. My excitement was only tempered by their lackluster responses. My folks contacted with some news 2 weeks before to the end of our residency. "We're hosting a celebration for Grace," my mother said with a smile. "A party without debt. We wish to congratulate her starting her job without financial concerns now that her loans have been paid off." The irony was oppressive. The previous evening, I had created my final estimated budget for debt repayments for the following 15 years. I lied, but that sounds fantastic. What time is it? The Westbrook Country Club on Saturday of next week. The entire family, as well as a large number of Grace's medical school pals, are invited. Willing you arrive early to assist in setting it up? I nodded, trying to hide the fact that I still wanted their approval and was terrified of what might happen. As asked, I showed up to the country club 3 hours before to the party the next Saturday. With floor-to-ceiling windows facing out over well-kept gardens, the space was sophisticated. My mom hadn't cut any corners. Each table was decorated with intricate floral centerpieces. "Congratulations, Dr. Grace, debt-free MD," was written on a giant bespoke banner while a champagne fountain bubbled in the corner. Family members started to come as I organized place cards, per my mother's instructions. My aunt cornered me right away. "Your parents are amazing for funding Grace's schooling," she said. "You two being physicians must make them very proud." "Yes," I said, suppressing the resentment that was about to strangle me. "They're very generous." Next was my uncle. "To write, you must be trying to pay off your debt. How long do you think it will take?" "Around 15, assuming all goes as planned." I forced a grin as I replied. Ignoring the hurt of his words, he laughed and said, "Well, that's the price of independence." I had mastered a robotic smile that never made it to my eyes by the time everyone had arrived. I watched in the background as my parents praised themselves for encouraging their children's aspirations and welcomed everyone while toasting Grace's new beginning. My phone vibrated in my pocket halfway through my father's lengthy toast about making investments for the future. To inspect it, I snuck out into the hallway. I'm thankful for any reason to skip the festivities. The Paterson Fellowship Committee sent the email. I opened it with shaking hands, anticipating yet another letdown in a lifetime of disappointments. Rather, congrats was the first word that drew my attention. To be sure I had been chosen as one of the 5 Paterson Fellows for the next year, I read the email 3 times. Complete loan forgiveness, a research stipend almost double Grace's salary, and a job at the esteemed Carter Neuroscience Institute were all benefits of the fellowship. It would entail putting my personal life on wait for years, spending long hours in the lab, and leaving behind the city I had come to love. However, such sacrifices didn't seem like much at the time, given the potential I had in front of me. I was stunned as I stood there looking at my phone, as Dr. Carter entered the country club via the open doors. As she had hinted, she had arrived at the ideal moment. She smiled broadly when she saw me right away. When the committee informed me that you had been chosen, she embraced me and said, "I couldn't wait to congratulate you in person." I requested the privilege of personally delivering the formal letter. An exquisite envelope bearing the Patterson seal was given to me by her. "Gina, you deserve this, all of it. Your work ethic is unparalleled, and your study idea was groundbreaking. The committee was especially pleased with the way you handled your budgetary limitations while doing groundbreaking research." I started crying, not only for the friendship but also for having someone who had such faith in me. My shoulder was touched by Dr. Carter. When I received the news, I decided to give the venue a call. "I hope it's okay that I'm interrupting your sister's celebration, but I felt that this needed to be properly announced before I could object." My father was still talking when Dr. Carter led me back into the ballroom. "I'm sorry." My father's statement was interrupted by Dr. Carter's forceful voice. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to make a crucial statement." As everyone's attention shifted to us, the room became quiet. The interruption caused my mother to seem irritated. Grace had an inquisitive but perplexed expression. For people who are unfamiliar with me, I am the director of the Carter Neuroscience Institute, Dr. Marion Carter. It is my privilege to announce that Dr. Gina Wilson has been chosen as one of this year's Paterson Neurology Fellows, which is why I am here today. A whisper swept through the audience. My dad's glass froze before it reached his lips. Only 5 doctors nationwide get this most coveted neurology fellowship each year. Dr. Carter went on to say that it honors outstanding medical research and the field's potential. Complete loan forgiveness, a sizable research grant, and a job at our institute are all benefits of the fellowship. The ensuing hush was deafening. Then, without warning, Grace began to cheer. Others joined reluctantly at first, but as the announcement's significance became clear, their enthusiasm grew. With practiced smiles, my parents came to my side after a speedy recovery. "We always knew you were going to be successful," my mom shouted a little too loudly. "We knew you didn't require our assistance for precisely this reason." In an effort to change history in real time, my father added. Dr. Carter's eyes hardened a little, but her smile stayed pleasant. "Gina did this solely on her own initiative and hard work. She worked extra hours to pay off her student loans while conducting her groundbreaking neuroplasticity research. She is totally responsible for her own success." The nuanced correction lingered. A few family members shifted uneasily, looking from me to my parents. Grace then moved forward. "Gina, congratulations. Despite having half the support, you have consistently put in twice as much work as I do." She looked over at our parents. "You've always favored me, Mom and Dad. Let's be honest for once. Gina has also never been treated fairly." Our mom's face turned red. "This isn't the place or time, Grace. It's the precise moment and location, in fact." Grace cut me off. "Thanks to you, you threw a party to celebrate my debt-free career launch. Gina has been putting in a lot of work and managing loans for the same education. But now she's accomplished something incredible, in spite of that drawback." The party disintegrated shortly after guests made awkward excuses to leave early. My parents busied themselves with cleanup, avoiding conversation. Dr. Carter stayed by my side, a protective presence, until most people had gone. Before leaving, my aunt hugged me tightly. "I've watched this happen your whole life," she whispered. "I should have said something years ago. I'm so proud of you, Gina." A few days later, my parents requested a family dinner to clear the air. I agreed, not out of obligation, but because I finally felt ready to speak my truth without fear of their disapproval. We met at their house, the scene of countless family dinners where I'd swallowed my feelings along with my food. This time was different. When my father began with excuses about how they'd always believed in my independence, I calmly raised my hand to stop him. "I needed parents, not evaluators of my resourcefulness," I said quietly. "I needed support not just financially, but emotionally. Every time you favored Grace, you sent a clear message that I wasn't as valuable, wasn't as worthy of investment." "That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "We're proud of you too. Perhaps you are now that I've succeeded, despite your lack of support. But I've accepted that I'll never be your priority. And that's okay. I don't need your validation anymore. Maybe one day we'll talk about what really mattered. But I no longer need that to be okay." My father's face crumpled slightly at this, a flash of genuine regret crossing his features before he composed himself. They seemed genuinely shocked by my calm certainty. Perhaps they'd expected tears or accusations or pleading. Instead, they faced a woman who had finally recognized her own worth, independent of their assessment. In the weeks that followed, our family dynamics shifted. My parents made awkward attempts at reconciliation, offering to contribute to my retirement fund, which I declined, sending expensive gifts which I returned, calling more frequently, which I answered selectively. I maintained polite but firm boundaries. Grace and I grew closer through the experience. She acknowledged the unfairness that had benefited her throughout our lives and supported my decision to create distance from our parents. For the first time, we related to each other as individuals rather than as competitors for parental approval. The Paterson Fellowship transformed my professional life. Freed from the burden of debt, I could focus entirely on my research. The Carter Neuroscience Institute became my academic home with Dr. Carter as the mentor and supporter I'd always needed under her guidance. I published my first major paper 6 months into the fellowship. The work was demanding, sometimes brutal. I spent endless nights in the lab, missed holidays with friends, and sacrificed the comforts of the city I'd left behind. There were moments when I questioned if I'd made the right choice, particularly during long holiday weekends when I was alone in the research facility while my colleagues were with family. But unlike my parents' expectations, the fellowship gave back in equal measure. My dedication wasn't taken for granted. It was recognized, valued, and rewarded. The sacrifices felt worth it because they were my choice, made for my future, not demanded as proof of my worth. On the day the journal arrived with my article, Dr. Carter framed the first page and hung it in her office next to her most significant achievements. "Your parents may not recognize your true value, Gina," she said, "but the medical community certainly does. And more importantly, I hope you do too. I do now." After a lifetime of being the other twin, I finally become simply Gina, a successful neurologist, a respected researcher, and a woman who discovered that the best revenge against those who underestimate you is to succeed beyond their limited vision of your worth. The dead is gone. So is the weight of seeking approval from those unwilling to give it. What remains is the knowledge that I built this success myself, brick by brick, loan payment by loan payment, late night by late night. No one can take that away from me, not even my parents. Story 3. We believed that a condo would be a better fit for you. My dad's fiancé claimed that I withdrew the trust after they conspired to sell my lake property during their engagement celebration. I never imagined having to defend what was properly mine from my own father. However, I realized that sometimes the ones closest to you may become the biggest risks to your future when I learned that he and his new wife were trying to transfer my lake house behind my back. Maria is my name. Up until 6 months ago, I thought that family meant unwavering love and support. I am currently 29 years old. I know better now. Sometimes being family means planning every action, recording every discussion, and bracing yourself for betrayal by those who ought to be your strongest allies. Deborah, my grandma, was the pillar of our family. She was observant, strong-willed, and passionately protective of the people she loved. Our family had owned the lake cottage for 3 generations. A lovely 2-story cottage with a private pier that stretches into pristine waterways, tucked away amid tall woods. This property was no ordinary one. Growing up, I spent every summer there learning how to fish, swim, and make a great campfire from Grandma Deborah. While we watched the sunset paint the sea in pink and orange strokes, she imparted her life lessons. She'd say, "Remember, Maria." She held a mug of tea in her grizzled hands. "Things that are material come and go. However, a location that embodies your memories is invaluable." The outlook was dire when grandmother was found to have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, maybe less than 6 months. While everyone around her fell apart, she took the news with the same poise and practicality that characterized her existence. She continued to be our pillar. I saw a shift in her dealings with my father over those last several months. When he visited, especially when he began bringing his new girlfriend Sophia around, there was a new guardedness in her gaze. Shortly after my mother's death, Sophia, who was 38 years old and 20 years younger than my father, became suspicious. 2 years ago, my father threw a family dinner to formally introduce Sophia to me. She had flawless hair, a well-practiced grin that never quite reached her eyes, and a remarkable height. I saw how she quietly inquired about family artifacts throughout dinner and how her eyes lingered on the artwork at my father's house. As she ran her fingertips over the old wood, she thought, "This grandfather clock must be worth a lot. Hasn't it been in the family for many generations?" The most striking thing to me was how rapidly my father changed when he was with her. Dad had always been reasonable, even thrifty. All of a sudden, though, he was upgrading his home to Sophia's specifications, purchasing pricey presents, and going on extravagant trips. He seemed frantic to show her how valuable he was. Grandma also took note. She gave me a hard grip on my hand during one of our quiet times in the hospital. She said in a whisper, her eyes as piercing as ever, but her voice weaker, "I've seen ladies like her before. They are skilled at identifying persons who are weak and have possessions." Grandma requested a private conversation with me 2 weeks before to her death. We had been cautioned by the nurses. She was rapidly disappearing. She was remarkably alert when I hurried to the hospital to find her, almost driven by an inner motivation. "Listen carefully, Maria," she said, her voice hardly audible above a whisper. "Regarding the lake house, I've made plans. You know it's important." The moment was cut short when a nurse came in to check her vitals before she could finish. Grandma fell asleep, and when she awoke, she appeared perplexed and unable to follow our conversation. She passed away quietly in her sleep 3 days later. Grief and paperwork dominated the weeks following Grandma's funeral. Only a month later, Dad and Sophia made their engagement announcement, which even our furthest flung relatives were shocked by for being so inappropriate. I maintained my distance, concentrating on my work as an architectural engineer and the grieving process instead. My grandmother. Then came the call that made all the difference. The professional voice on the other end was Maria Rhodes. Not familiar. Margaret Winters from the Associates law firm Blackwell is here. I'm calling in reference to the estate of your grandmother, Deborah Rhodes. There's something that needs your immediate attention. On the following morning, I was seated on the end of the nose of Miss Winters, a perceptive woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses. She slid a folder across her desk. About 3 months prior to her death, your grandmother paid me a visit. She clarified that she was worried about some changes in your family's circumstances. Inside the folder was a copy of a transfer request for the lake house property, a request initiated by my father to add Sophia's name to the deed. My stomach dropped. There was also a sticky note attached to the document with my father's handwriting. After the wedding, begin the process of moving completely to S. I don't understand, I said, my voice hollow. How could he do this? The lake house was supposed to come to me. Miss Winters removed her glasses. Your grandmother anticipated something like this might happen. That's why she came to me. She handed me another document, a trust agreement dated 6 weeks before Grandma's death. The language was complex, but the intent was crystal clear. The lake house had been placed in an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. My grandmother had already transferred the property before her death. Your grandmother was quite explicit about her wishes, Miss Winters continued. She wanted to ensure that the property remained in your possession, regardless of any attempts to redirect it. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and betrayal wash over me. Grandma had protected me, but the fact that she needed to protect me from my own father was devastating. There's more, Miss Winter said, her expression grave. Your grandmother hired a private investigator to look into Sophia's background. The findings are concerning. The report revealed that Sophia had been married twice before, both times to wealthy older men. Her first marriage ended when her husband lost his fortune in bad investments. The second ended with a contentious divorce after the husband's children discovered she had been systematically liquidating assets. There were also records of 2 property transfers, similar to what she and my father were attempting with the lake house. This wasn't just opportunism. This was a pattern. That night, I barely slept. The betrayal cut deep. Not just Sophia's calculated deception, but my father's willingness to steal my inheritance. The lake house wasn't merely a valuable property. It was the actual manifestation of my relationship to Grandma, to our family history. Over the next week, I worked closely with Miss Winters to understand exactly where things stood. The confidence was unshakable. There was no legal method for my father or Sophia to touch the property. However, they didn't know that yet. Their transfer request had been highlighted by the county clerk's office because of the trust, which is how Miss Winters had been told, but no rejection had been completed. We might just advise them that the property is under trust. Miss Winters said that would be the easy method, but something in me had hardened. The simple method wouldn't betray their goals to the family. It wouldn't make my father acknowledge what he'd done. Most importantly, it wouldn't show Sophia for who she actually was. No, I answered forcefully. I want to address them myself. When they realize what they've done, I want to see their expressions. With a flicker of approval in her eyes, Miss Winters nodded. That's what your grandma would have done. Together, we came up with a plan. I would start by learning more about their intentions for the land. Secondly, I would diligently record everything. Third, at the next family meal, honoring their engagement, an occasion I had originally intended to avoid, I would openly confront them. I took on the role of the unwitting daughter for the following 2 weeks. I made careful to show interest in Sophia's plans to update the family homes when I went to my father's house. The knowledge was freely exchanged. They believed I didn't know anything, so they had no need to be wary of me. During one visit, Sophia said, "The lake house has so much potential. If the views were developed correctly, they may fetch a higher price. According to a real estate acquaintance of mine, developers could buy the site alone for a fortune. My dad heartily nodded in agreement. Sophia sees these things in such a way. A buyer has already shown interest in the home. A buyer once the transfer was complete? I questioned, keeping my cool in spite of the anger that was building within of me. Grandma's lake house is going to be sold? At least my dad had the grace to appear uneasy. Maria, it's simply sitting there empty. Liquidating the asset makes more financial sense. Sophia can get us far more than our market worth because, to her connections, I said, meticulously noting every word I see. What about the lake house that Grandma wanted me to have? It always came to me, she remarked. With ease, Sophia leaped in and touched my father's arm. I've talked to your father about it, darling. We believed we could reserve a tiny percentage of the sales for you. Maybe enough for a condo down payment. Doesn't it sound good? Something more appropriate for you, a young professional. My resolve was strengthened by their disdain. Their goals became increasingly apparent with each talk. They planned to sell to a developer who would demolish the old cottage and construct opulent holiday residences. The money raised would be used to pay for their early retirement in a beachside home. Sophia had previously chosen. It didn't honor Grandma's legacy or include me. When Sophia was showing me samples of renovations and I happened to find printouts of money statements in my father's office, the last piece came together. The financial accounts showed serious problems. At Sophia's insistence, my father had been making hazardous investments that were draining his retirement funds. They were more than avaricious. They were in a grave situation. An elegant restaurant with a view of the city hosted my father and Sophia's engagement dinner. A few close friends and family members from both sides were there. Professionally attired and with a leather portfolio, I arrived early. My father appeared happy that I had tried, although he arched an eyebrow at my formal dress. He kissed my cheek and whispered, "You look nice, Maria. I'm happy you were able to attend." Sophia came over in a fancy outfit and gave me the fake warmth she had perfected. "We didn't think you would arrive, Mario. Lately, you've been quite busy." I smiled back at her, just as sincerely I wouldn't miss it. Family is everything after all, isn't it? I saw how they interacted with the family during the appetizers and main meal. Everyone was captivated by Sophia, but my father's elder relatives were particularly impressed by her attentiveness. My father grinned proudly, obviously thinking he had won something. My father clinked his glass in toast when dessert was presented. He talked of fresh starts, and how, following the death of my mother, Sophia had restored his life's brightness. I sipped my water and waited patiently for him to complete his act. I got to my feet as the cheering subsided. I also want to say something. Despite my heart pounding, I made the announcement in a firm voice. Everyone looked at me. My father gave me a supportive nod, perhaps anticipating some words of accommodation. After I made it clear for weeks that I didn't like their relationship, I started by faking a grin and said, "Congratulations on your engagement. Seeing your relationship grow so rapidly has undoubtedly been eye-opening." When I opened my portfolio, I took out the first document, the request for a property transfer, along with my father's statement, stating that Sophia would now have complete possession. "Maybe, Dad, you could tell everyone why you're trying to move Grandma's lake house, the one that she specifically requested I have, to Sophia." There was silence in the room. My father's face lost its hue. "He didn't start here or at this time, Maria. Since I've learned that it's more than just transferring the property, I actually believe that now is the ideal moment and location for me to step in. You intend to sell it to developers who will totally ruin it." Sophia's eyes had hardened to a wince, but her rehearsed smile stayed steady. "There appears to be a miscommunication, Maria. I was just talking to your father about our possibilities. No misunderstanding," I said, taking out a different paper. Grandma's hired private investigator found printouts of text exchanges exchanged between Sophia and a real estate developer. A $1.8 million sale price has already been agreed upon, provided that you get complete ownership. You even spoke about designating it as your principal residence after marriage in order to avoid paying capital gains tax. The group was filled with murmurs. My father's brother, Uncle Robert, frowned and leaned forward. "Is this accurate, Charles?" he made a demand. My dad appeared to be stuck. It's not as simple as Maria is making it seem. Maria works in the city, and the property needs costly maintenance. She doesn't have time to keep it up, I said icily. That's my choice to make. Thankfully, though, Grandma anticipated this. I carefully took the trust agreement out of my portfolio and passed it to my father across the table. 3 months before to her passing, Grandma established an irrevocable trust. I was the only beneficiary when the lake house was moved to that trust. Since you no longer have any legal claim to the property, your request to transfer it was noted. For months, it hasn't been yours to sell. There was complete stillness after that. My father's hands trembled a little as he took in the contents of the document. Before she could gather herself, Sophia's mask finally came off, her face twisted in rage. She said, "This can't be legal. Deborah was ill. She wasn't thinking clearly. Grandma was fully conscious, and the trust was duly signed in front of several witnesses." I responded, "But I'm not done yet." The question of why Grandma felt the need to defend her property against her own son remains unanswered. I gave out copies of the private investigator's report on Sophia, which had been carefully edited to omit all but the most pertinent details on her previous marriages and financial maneuvers. Twice, Sophia Hamilton, previously known as Sophia Crane and Sophia De Laurentiis, I announced. Twice, after brief marriages to affluent older men, they left with substantial riches. Despite the disbelieving looks on everyone's faces around the table, I persisted because I was determined to complete the task at hand. "I'm not trying to harm you, Dad. Grandma protected me, so I'm doing this to protect you today. You are not Sophia's spouse out of love. She is aiming after your possessions that are quickly depreciating as a result of the investments she has urged you to make." Sophia got up so suddenly that her chair fell back. "Charles, these are ludicrous charges. Will you allow her to speak to me in this manner?" With his gaze shifting from the trust paperwork to Sophia to me, my father was completely disoriented. I caught a glimpse of the father. I recalled him coming out of whatever haze Sophia had placed over him, attentive, careful, and loving. "Is it accurate?" In a low voice, he inquired about your past marriages. Her uncertainty was sufficient enough. He went on in a hollow voice. "You mentioned that you had only ever been married once to your college sweetheart. You said that you grew apart, which is why it ended." When Sophia saw the game was finished, her face stiffened. "This is absurd. Your ungrateful daughter doesn't have to sit here and trash me." My father watched in disbelief as she snatched up her purse and hurried off. The weeks after the altercation were challenging. At first, my father became protective and embarrassed, withdrawing into a furious silence. As swiftly as she had entered his life, Sophia vanished from it, but not before making an effort to obtain a farewell present for her mental anguish. I keep my distance, letting the truth of what transpired set in. For the first time after Grandma's passing, I visited the lake house and concentrated on it. The furniture was coated with dust, indicating that the home had been neglected. The dock required maintenance. The garden was overgrown. I cleaned, repaired, and replanted there on the weekends. Every chore was a way to honor Grandma's love and thoughtfulness while re-establishing a connection with her. My father showed up at my flat door 3 weeks after the altercation. He appeared older and less confident due to guilt and betrayal. "Can we have a conversation?" he asked plainly. Unspoken comments filled the void between us as we sat at my kitchen table. "At last," he said something. His voice was raspy with emotion as he confessed, "I've been a fool. I felt lost once your mother passed away. Sophia restored my sense of youth. Significant. I wanted to think she loved me only because of me. Not cruelly," I said. "But since you are weak, she singled you out. She has mastered the pattern. That doesn't justify my actions. Violating your grandmother's desires by attempting to seize your inheritance. I persuaded myself that you didn't require the lake house like Sophia. Thus, it was a sensible solution. I also needed the cash." He gave a head shake. "Mario, I want you to know I'm sorry, but I don't expect you to pardon me." "I'm very sorry." The apology was a beginning, but it didn't seem like enough given the extent of his treachery. We decided to start the gradual process of restoring our mutual trust. However, I made it apparent that he would need to put in time and constant effort to make amends. I poured myself into the refurbishment of the lake home. In order to maintain the historic charm of the cabin and repair the dock, I engaged local artisans to modernize its deteriorating systems. Where elder trees had fallen in recent storms along the coast, I planted fresh seedlings. The property seemed more spiritually and legally mine with each addition. I learned things about my grandma that I had never known before in the process. A collection of letters she and my grandpa wrote during World War II to the gardening shed housed painstaking diaries detailing decades of observations about local animals, hidden behind a loose floorboard in her bedroom. If Sophia had intended to sell and destroy the property, these treasures would have been gone forever. I invited my father to the lake cottage 6 months after our altercation. It was a clear fall day, and the motionless river nicely mirrored the colorful foliage. As we stood on the repaired pier, I informed him that Grandma was right about this spot. "It's our history, not simply property." He mutely admitted that your grandma was correct on many things, particularly Sophia. "She left me heavily indebted," he added when he paused. "She forced me to make certain investments, you know. They were not sound. I have to reduce my size." At 58, start afresh. Unsurprised yet compassionate, I nodded. It's never too late for a new beginning, as Grandma would say. Grandma was all about us as the sun started to set, filling the sky with the pinks and oranges. I remembered from my early years. She had safeguarded this location, not just for me, but also for the future of our family, for the customs and tales that would endure here long after we were gone. With sincere appreciation in his voice, my father remarked, "Thank you for inviting me here. I'm not worthy." "No, you don't," I concurred, but Grandma would prefer that we make an effort to recover. Family was always the focus here. The true meaning of family, love, forgiveness, and protection for her after it has been earned. After standing in quiet, we watched as the lake turned to black. The road ahead would not be simple. What was damaged, however, could be repaired, just like the lake home itself. Perhaps different, but solid again. In addition to protecting my inheritance, my grandmother's greatest gift to me was teaching me how to secure the things that are most important. Principles, not simply possessions. Legacy as well as assets. The most significant lesson Mom imparted to me in her last gesture of love was that sometimes you have to stand up for what's rightfully yours, out of respect for those who loved you enough to secure your future, not out of greed.